West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Our job is to legislate, not to continue to investigate something in the back when you cannot find any reason to impeach this president.
I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden.
She cannot change the laws of this Congress. She cannot unilaterally decide we're in an impeachment inquiry.
I do not make this decision lightly.
That was Kevin McCarthy in 2019 explaining how an impeachment cannot be started unilaterally, which is precisely what he just did as Republicans try to gaslight Americans into thinking Joe Biden is just like Donald Trump. But we begin tonight with a line that every American should memorize. It was first uttered by Donald Trump during the lead up to January 6th. And it goes like this. Just say there is corruption and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. And that, as it turns out, is what House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and his caucus of MAGA misfit toys have been trying to do with President Biden. Even though Trump's own Department of Justice couldn't find any corruption, Senators Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley led investigative committees that found nothing and cleared Joe Biden. And so did the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Yep, you heard that right. But like I said, facts be damned. Just say there's corruption and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. And to that point, this was Kevin McCarthy this morning.
So you have all these questions, and to be able to get the answers to those questions, you're going to have to subpoena certain documents.
Now, we all know that Mr. McCarthy isn't the whiz. The woman behind the curtain pulling the strings is named Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia congresswoman who has demanded Biden's impeachment for fill in the blanks, whatever, since before he even took office. And Trump's Mike Kevin has now given her what she and the twice impeached, 4 times indicted former president both demanded. According to the New York Times, Greene and the civilly liable for sexual abuse former president seemingly knew this was coming and discussed over fish and Diet Coke the House planned to impeach President Biden. Apparently, she told the Times that she told Trump she wants to make impeachment long and excruciatingly painful for Joe Biden. Because that's the point, isn't it? To punish Biden for Trump's dual impeachments, to even the score, and make Trump look less bad for having tried to extort Ukraine and then trying to overturn an election with an armed coup. To say nothing of the 4 indictments. Did I mention the 4 indictments? Yes, I think I mentioned the 4 indictments. Then there is serial liar and fraudster Congressman George Santos, or is it Anthony DeValder Santos or Kitara Rivas? The New York congressman, who is currently indicted by the Department of Justice for fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, and false statements, went on CNN to talk about Biden.
Joe Biden has a treasure trove, starting with his son, Hunter Biden, cocaine in the White House, laptops from hell, all these things, and none of this is spoken about on your network.
Okay, this guy is Republicans' character witness for their impeachment inquiry, really? Then there's Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. He has spent years barking sound bites for Fox about accountability and justice. The same Jim Jordan who has been accused by multiple former Ohio State University wrestlers of ignoring credible claims of sexual abuse by the team's physician. He denies the allegations, of course. Then there is Mr. Impeachment himself, Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. Now, we all know his face because he's been all over Fox and CNN, utterly failing to support his corruption claims. What you probably didn't know is that this guy has his own past questionable behavior. In a recent profile, the New York Times reported that during a failed 2015 campaign, he was accused by a former girlfriend of hitting her and taking her to a clinic for an abortion, an account that was supported by her roommate at the time. He denied it. It doesn't stop there. In an effort to stop the reporting on those allegations, Comer allegedly distributed unlawfully obtained emails between a reporter and a source, a fact he admitted to the New York Times. Now, I'm not sure how legal that is, but maybe he would like to take up an impeachment inquiry to find more facts. Folks, this is the Delta Force of justice in the House of Representatives. Most of them are millionaires, some real and some made up. And while these members chase Trump down the QAnon rabbit hole, they are turning their backs on years of actual corruption involving a president and a family member whose name is not Hunter Biden.
I rise today to urge House Republicans to investigate one of the modern American scandals and political cons. Now, why did the Saudi government give Jared Kushner $2 billion just months after he left the Trump White House? Kushner, who oversaw Middle East policy for his father-in-law, has enriched himself and his family in what is clearly an enormous grift and likely serious conflict of interest crimes. The American people deserve answers, and I urge my colleagues across the aisle to answer all our calls and subpoena Jared Kushner's company once and for all.
So here's the thing. Comer abandoned an investigation opened by Democrats into Trump improperly profiting off the presidency. He also killed a separate inquiry into the business dealings of Jared Kushner with the Saudis, because they don't care about actual corruption. They only care about hurting Joe Biden politically ahead of the next election, because as Simon Rosenberg pointed out on this program last night, they clearly don't think that they can beat him without making him as dirty as Trump. But here's the problem. They're not starting from scratch with some unknown politician. They're starting with Joe Biden. You know, Joey from Scranton who likes ice cream, Corvettes, Ray-Bans, and his family. Biden has been around for decades. His brand ain't new. And that's precisely why Barack Obama picked him as his vice president. He's the 29-year-old who was sworn in as a senator in a hospital next to his two young sons after their mother and sister were killed in a tragic car accident. A major news story at the time. He's the guy who chaired the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing of Clarence Thomas. That's in the 90s, by the way. He's the guy who pressured Republicans back in 1993 to help pass an assault weapons ban. He's the guy who, back in 2007, destroyed Rudy Giuliani's presidential ambitions by saying, quote, "There's only three things Rudy mentions in a sentence, a noun, a verb, and 9/11. He's the guy who helped President Obama pass one of the most important pieces of healthcare legislation in American history, and then whispered goofily into an open microphone, "This is a BFD," but he didn't use the initials. Joe Biden has lived practically his entire adult life in the public eye. This impeachment inquiry is Republicans trying to rewrite history because they don't like the current reality. They're trying to gaslight you into believing a guy who was once mocked for being one of the poorest guys in the Senate hatched some sort of nefarious decades-long campaign to fatten the Biden family coffers without a single journalist noticing. I mean, how could we have missed it? What they are trying to do with a not too small amount of help from Fox and some members of the mainstream media, too, who ran this same playbook with Hillary Clinton and her emails, is to get you to somehow forget who Joe Biden is and replace that reality in your minds with the MAGA fan fiction that he is a master criminal, just like Donald Trump, minus the gold toilet. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California, a member of the House Oversight Committee, and Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist and former House Oversight Committee spokesman back when he was a Republican. I want to go to the congressman first, Because I don't know how old you are, I'm not going to presume, but I know you're one of the younger members of the House. And so I would wager to say Joe Biden has been a public figure for your entire life. And yet, we're supposed to believe that this same guy has been running a apparent criminal enterprise for decades. Has anyone on the other side of the aisle admitted to you that they know that that is pure BS and that they're just doing this to try to beat him in the next election?
Yes, absolutely. We have, as a freshman member, there are freshman Republicans who are out there who know this whole thing is BS and it's all politics. The truth is that this is completely about trying to elect Donald Trump as president. And the reason that folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene and George Santos are out front is because Kevin McCarthy has completely lost control of his entire caucus. And so now what we have is essentially a political campaign by Donald Trump being waged through the most MAGA extremists in the House to try to damage President Biden, who, by the way, has done absolutely nothing wrong. We know that there is zero evidence of the president doing actually anything illegal or close to improper here as in his administration. And so this attack that's currently happening is shameful. It's quite frankly, to most of us, is a complete joke. We, of course, stand behind President Biden, and everything, Joy, you said in your opener is absolutely correct. This is now a Republican Party that is run by Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
It is Thursday, the 14th of September of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and Precious the little Yorkie is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, only a little. Okay, so looks like quite a bit happening out there. Once again, I need to remind folks we had to put ourselves in a bubble. So I do know that they are televising the testimony down there in Georgia about, I guess, Cheeseboro? I like to call him Cheesyboro. Wants the grand jury transcripts and the witness list of all the people who had testified in the grand jury. Now, of course, prosecution doesn't want to publicize that because the grand jury, the bailiffs and everybody that are known have been intimidated already, threats to their lives. And looks like maybe, even though I put myself in a bubble, I know this a little bit because I had to turn away. It looks like Chesborough's counsel is arguing that they need to know who those witnesses are. Otherwise, Chesborough's boss, Donald Trump, won't be able to intimidate them. He won't be able to intimidate their family and their co-workers and their friends and neighbors too. That's how important the motion is to turn over that information. They need it. Okay. So once again, I had to put myself in a bubble because we just have already a curated show. And in that curated show, we use it as a form of psychological balance. The world is such as it is. It's so chaotic. And in curating a show, it gives us a sense of order and balance. Where we can actually catch a breath. That's what I like to say. Anyway, we're not going to go into a long rant this morning. We're going to spend a little bit more time giving you what we've curated. So why don't we give you a rundown right now on what we have in store? Yes, the GOP is run by Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I guess Berbert's out of the picture now. Is she a functional drunk? Is that why they're kicking her out? Because they need people who are just Looney Tunes on their own? Yeah, I guess, maybe. Anyway, continuing on here in the Bistro Cafe, the Biden administration is recommending an overhaul of a 151-year-old mining law that will make companies pay royalties for the first time for copper, gold, and other hard rock minerals. It's going to make a lot of mining companies mad, and too bad. Facing a $1.5 billion deficit, the California State University system will hike tuition 6% annually for the next 5 years. And two leading conservation groups sued the Bureau of Land Management for rangeland degradation. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where French regulators ordered Apple to stop selling the iPhone 12, saying it emits electromagnetic radiation levels that are above European Union standards. And the Russian spaceport, visited by North Korea's Kim, has a history of corruption and construction delays. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Across the page to the left from that chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you became a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and were able to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that helps us pay our bills and fly under the radar, thereby continuing this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over 13 years now because of your generosity. So we still need it because, hey, the bills keep piling up and we keep paying them, and we thank you for helping us do so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, I think Blue Sky pretty soon, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, and thank you, Tom, for doing so. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow me on all of those by simply going to @JusticePutnam, or in some cases, only Justice Putnam. And just don't write in only. Just type in Justice Putnam. N before M, man spelled backwards. Anyway, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime. I just put it in queue and it comes up automatically because that's how it works. And in those show notes and links diaries, you'll be able to find the links to the actual articles in which we draw such great inspiration from. You can also follow the show on Twitter, though it be only a placemat at this point, at Cookbook West. And most importantly, if you could pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, that would be great. You just won't be able to find them on Stitcher because SiriusXM destroyed Stitcher. And we are not happy about it. Not one whit. We're not. Okay. Matthew Daly brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And he's from the Associated Press, by the way. The Biden administration is recommending changes to a 151-year-old law that governs mining for copper, gold, and other hard rock minerals on U.S.-owned lands, including making companies for the first time pay royalties on what they extract. A plan led by the Interior Department also calls for the creation of a mine leasing system and coordination of permitting efforts among a range of federal agencies. This comes as the White House has been pushing to boost domestic mining for minerals needed for electric vehicles, solar panels, and other clean energy. Oh no, it's woke! Under terms of an 1872 law, the U.S. does not collect royalties on minerals extracted from federal lands, a fact Democratic lawmakers and environmental groups have long lamented. The White House plan would impose a variable 4% to 8% net royalty on hard rock minerals produced on federal lands. Now, the proposal needs approval by Congress, unlikely when the House is controlled by Republicans who have long opposed such fees. Now, undeterred by such political reality, an interagency working group led by Interior touted the benefits of imposing royalties on about 750 hard rock mines on federal lands, mostly in the West. The figure does not include about 70 coal mines whose owners must pay federal royalties. Olga R. Rodriguez of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Trustees at California State University, the nation's largest public university system, voted yesterday, Wednesday, to raise student tuition by 6% each year for 5 consecutive years to try to narrow a $1.5 billion deficit, a decision that some students called disheartening. Well, that's a nice way of putting it. The university's governing board voted 9-0 to approve the increases that will start across the 23-campus system in the fall of 2024. That's coming up. Annual tuition for the full-time California undergrad students will increase by $342 next year to $6,184. And by 2028 to 2029 school year, those students will be paying $7,682. The tuition hikes are needed to provide support to students both through financial aid and programs to help them succeed academically, university officials say. The extra revenue is also needed to give more resources to faculty and staff and maintain school facilities, according to a report about the system's finances released in May. The report found the system with 460,000 students, many of them minorities and first-generation college students, has enough revenue to cover about 86% of what it actually costs to meet student, staff, and institution needs, leaving it with a $1.5 billion gap. Officials last increased tuition in 2017 when they approved a 5% or $270 increase. Since then, inflation grew by 39%. The university receives 60% of its funding from the state government, and the rest comes from tuition. Kylie Moore of the High Country News brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Bureau of Land Management oversees 246 million acres of land, scrubby sagebrush, rolling deserts, and dense forests, mostly in the western U.S. It's home to all sorts of things from sage grouse, pronghorn, and ponderosa pines to dirt bikers, cows, and drilling infrastructure. But a new lawsuit filed yesterday on Wednesday in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia alleges that the BLM is not managing its land in a way that fulfills its environmental responsibilities. Attorneys from Advocates of the West filed the lawsuit on behalf of environmental nonprofits Western Watersheds Project and Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, otherwise known as PEER. Across much of the West, we see BLM as the Bureau of Land Mismanagement, said Chandra Rosenthal, Rocky Mountain PEER director, in a press release. And the lawsuit states that the BLM has not conducted required environmental reviews for almost 2/3 of its 35,000 current grazing permits. The agency leases more than half of its acreage to ranchers as grazing allotments for livestock. The reviews are required under the National Environmental Policy Act, which established a framework for assessing the environmental impacts of activities like grazing and mining. But reviews are not occurring on the majority of grazing allotments that overlap with important conservation areas, the lawsuit says, including national monuments, national conservation areas, critical habitat for endangered or threatened species, high-priority sage-grouse habitat, and land where domestic sheep graze in close proximity to wild bighorn sheep. According to the complaint, the agency's failure to complete these assessments violates the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, which mandates that grazing allotments with environmental significance be prioritized for reviews depending on available funding. Grazing permits have been renewed multiple times without assessment, the complaint notes. Some allotments have not had a NEPA analysis for 15 or more years. According to the BLM's own data, analyzed by Western Watersheds Project for the lawsuit, this is a growing trend. The percentage of allotments reauthorized without an environmental assessment rose from 28% in 2013 to 54% in 2021. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Have you ever wondered what songbirds are actually saying to each other with all of their chirping?
Or what your cat could possibly be yowling about so early in the morning?
Well, powerful new technologies are helping researchers decode animal communication and even begin to talk back to non-humans.
Advanced sensors and artificial intelligence might have us at the brink of interspecies communication.
Today, we're talking about how scientists are starting to communicate with creatures like bats and honeybees, and how these conversations are forcing us to rethink our relationship with other species. I'm Kelso Harper, multimedia editor at Scientific American.
And I'm Sophie Bushwick, tech editor.
You're listening to Science Quickly. Hey, Sophie.
Hi, Kelso.
So, you recently chatted with the author of a new book called The Sounds of Life: How Digital Technology is Bringing Us Closer to the Worlds of Animals and Plants.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Karen Bacher, a professor at the University of British Columbia and a fellow at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. Her book explores how researchers are leveraging new tech to understand animal communication in the burgeoning field of digital bioacoustics.
Digital bioacoustics. Huh. So, what does that actually look like? Are we trying to make animals talk like humans using translation collars like in the movie Up?
My name is Doug. My master made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
Not quite, but that is similar to how researchers first started trying to communicate with animals in the 70s and 80s, which is to say they attempted to teach the animals human language. But many scientists today have moved away from this human-centric approach, and instead they want to understand animal communication on its own terms.
So, instead of trying to teach birds to speak English, we're deciphering what they're already saying to each other in birdish or birdese.
Right, exactly. This new field of digital bioacoustics uses portable field recorders that are like mini microphones you can put pretty much anywhere. In trees, on mountaintops, even on the backs of whales and birds. They record sound 24/7 and create oodles of data, which is where artificial intelligence comes in. Researchers can apply natural language processing algorithms, like the ones used by Google Translate, to detect patterns in these recordings and begin to decode what animals might be saying to each other.
Wow, that is wild. So, what have scientists learned from this so far?
One of the examples Karen gives in her book is about Egyptian fruit bats. A researcher named Yossi Yovel recorded audio and video of nearly 24 bats for 2.5 months. His team adapted a voice recognition program to analyze 15,000 of the sounds, and then the algorithm correlated specific sounds to certain social interactions in the videos, like fighting over food or jockeying for sleeping positions. So this research, combined with some other related studies, has revealed that bats are capable of complex communication.
All I remember being taught was that bats make high-pitched sounds to echolocate as they fly around. But it sounds like there's a lot more to it than that.
Yes, definitely. We've learned that bats have what are known as signature calls, which act like individual names.
Whoa.
And they distinguish between sexes when they communicate with each other.
What?
They have dialects, they argue over food and sleeping positions, they socially distance when they're ill.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they're better at it in some ways than we are. So one of the coolest things is that bat mothers use their own version of motherese with their young. So when humans talk to cute little babies, we use motherese. We raise our pitch, like, "Ooh, what a cute little sweet potato." And bats also use a special tone to talk to their young, but they lower their pitch instead.
"Ooh, what a cute little sweet potato."
This makes the bat babies babble back, and it might help them learn specific quote-unquote words or referential sounds, the same way that motherese helps human babies acquire language.
That is bonkers. Or, I don't know, is it? Do I just think it is because I've been caught in that trap of thinking that humans are somehow completely different from other animals and we have a, uniquely sophisticated way of communicating? Are we learning that we might not be quite as special as we thought?
Kind of, yeah. This work is raising a lot of important philosophical questions and ethical ones, too. For a long time, philosophers said we would never be able to determine if animals can be said to have language, let alone be able to decipher or speak it. But these new technologies have really changed the game. One thing that Karen said during our interview is that we can't talk to bats, but our computers can. You and I can't hear, let alone keep up with, the fast, high-pitched communication between bats, and we certainly can't speak it ourselves, but electronic sensors and speakers can. And with artificial intelligence, we can begin to trace patterns in animal communication that we never could before. People still debate the question of if we can call it animal language, but it's becoming clear that animals have much more complex ways of communicating than we thought before.
Apparently. What other examples of this can you find in the book?
Karen also told me the story of a bee researcher named Tim Landgraf. So, honeybee communication, very different from our own. They use not just sounds, but also the movements of their bodies to speak. So, have you heard of the famed waggle dance?
Yeah, is that the one where the bees shake their fuzzy little butts in different directions to explain where to find nectar?
That's the one! But the waggle dance is just one form of honeybee communication. Landgraf and his team used a combination of natural language processing, like in the bat study, and computer vision, which analyzes imagery, to decipher both the sounds and the wiggles of bee chatter. They're now able to track individual bees and predict the impact of what one bee says to another.
That is so cool.
Yeah, they have all sorts of specific signals that the researchers have given these funny names. So bees toot and quack. They have a whooping sound for danger, piping signals related to swarming, and they use a hush or stop signal to get the hive to quiet down.
Wow, I love the image of a quacking bee.
Landgraf's next step was to encode what they learned into a robotic bee, which he called, drumroll please, RoboBee!
Classic.
After 7 or 8 prototypes, they had a RoboBee that could actually go into a hive, and then it would emit commands like the stop signal, and the bees would obey.
That is bananas! Just one step closer to the very science-based world of Bee Movie.
The height of cinematic achievement, truly.
I gotta say something. You like jazz?
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else from your conversation with Karen that you'd like to add?
I'd love to end on one quote from her. She said, "The invention of digital bioacoustics is analogous to the invention of the microscope."
Whoa.
The microscope opened up an entire new world to us and laid the foundation for countless scientific breakthroughs visually. And that's what digital bioacoustics is doing with audio for the study of animal communication. Karen says it's like a, quote, planetary scale hearing aid that enables us to listen anew with both our prosthetically enhanced ears and our imagination.
What a great analogy.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where the research goes from here and how it might change the way we think about the so-called divide between humans and non-humans.
Yeah, I'm already questioning everything I thought I knew. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Squeak, squeak, buzz, buzz, my friends.
And a buzz, buzz right back to you. If you're still curious, you can read more about this on our site in Sophie's Q&A with Karen Bacher, and, of course, in Karen's new book, The Sounds of Life. Thanks for tuning in to Science Quickly. This podcast is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tuli Cabose, and me, Kelso Harper. Our theme music was composed by Dominic Smith. Special thanks today to Martin Benchik of Nottingham Trent University and James Nye at the University of California, San Diego for providing excellent examples of honeybee toots and quacks and whoops.
Don't forget to subscribe, and for more in-depth science news, features, podcasts, and videos, head to scientificamerican.com. For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Sophie Bushwick.
And I'm Kelso Harper. See you next time. I'm so excited. Also, I will be turning your Boo Boo Bee Boss Sweet Potato into Boo Boo Bee Boss Sweet Potato.
Yes, it's all I've ever wanted.
Hi, Science Quickly listeners. This is Jeff Delvicio, executive producer of the show. The whole podcast team is out in the field, so while we're away, we're bringing back a few amazing oldies from the archive. Today, we dive into your brain during bouts of intense learning. Maybe that happens to you when you listen to this podcast. Producer Karen Hopkin brings us a study that looked at brain training and how rest might be the key to training your brain even faster. The episode first aired on July 21st, 2021, when we were still called 60 Second Science. Memories. Enjoy!
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. They say that practice makes perfect. But sometimes, the best practice is not on a keyboard. It's all in your head. Because a new study shows that the brain takes advantage of the rest periods during practice to review new skills, a mechanism that facilitates learning. The work appears in the journal Cell Reports.
A lot of the skills we learn in life are sequences of individual actions.
Leonardo Cohen of the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, or NINDS.
For example, playing a piece of piano music requires pressing individual keys in the correct sequence with very precise timing.
That level of virtuosity requires a ton of practice and a lot of repetition. But Cohen says it also requires a certain amount of rest.
We know from previous research that interspersing rest with practice during training is advantageous for learning a new skill. In fact, we recently showed that virtually all early skill learning is evidenced during rest rather than during the actual practice.
It's during those intermittent breaks that the brain starts to sew together the individual movements that make up a seamless piece. And the question then becomes, how? To find out, Cohen and his colleagues turned to an imaging technique called magnetoencephalography, or MEG.
The unique advantage of MEG is that it allows us to observe neural activity across the entire brain with millisecond time resolution, which is crucial for investigating very fast, widespread brain dynamics.
Ethan Bush, Cohen's colleague at NINDS. They and their team had 30 volunteers sit inside an MEG scanner, and they asked them to type the sequence 41324 on a keyboard as quickly and accurately as possible. The participants would type for 10 seconds, rest for 10 seconds, and then repeat, while the researchers monitored their neural activity.
And what we found was really quite interesting. So we actually found that the brain kept replaying much faster versions of the practice activity patterns over and over again during rest.
So a sequence that might take 1 second for fingers to type would take just 50 milliseconds for the brain to replay.
So that's an impressive 20-fold compression.
The regions most active were those involved in controlling movement and representing sequences. And the more often the brain repeated the sequence, the faster the subject improved.
When the participants were beginning to learn the skill, they were initially typing about 5 to 6 repetitions of the sequence during each 10 seconds of practice. But during rest, the brain replayed about 25 repetitions of the sequence, and that's a 5-fold increase over the same amount of time.
That lightning-quick neural rehearsal supercharges learning and memory.
It's as if the brain actively exploits these rest periods to amplify the effects of practice and rapidly consolidate the skill memory. And this actually appears to be the skill binding mechanism that we were looking for.
So, next time you sit down to practice, give yourself a break, or a lot of little breaks. Your brain and your audience will thank you. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day that Ella Mae Wiggins was gunned down on her way to a rally of striking textile workers in North Carolina. Ella Mae was born in the mountains of Tennessee. Her father was a lumberjack who was killed on the job. She and her brother had entered the textile mills to help support their family. She married another mill employee, and they had 7 children. When her husband left, Ella Mae struggled to keep her family afloat. When the Great Depression came, textile mill workers were subject to the, quote, stretch out. Owners demanded that fewer workers quicken their pace to produce the same results. In response, textile workers began to organize and strike in Gaston County, the heart of the Southern textile industry. Ella Mae became a local leader of the National Textile Workers Union. She advocated for organizing both white and black workers. She became known for leading the other workers in song. One of her most poignant songs was the Mill Mother's Lament. The lyrics told her personal struggle of a mother trying to support her children. On the day she was killed, Ella Mae was in a truck heading to the workers' rally. They were met by an armed mob deployed by the mill owners. The unarmed workers turned their truck around, but the mob chased them and gunned down Ella Mae. 5 people were charged, but they were acquitted of her murder.
We leave our homes in the morning, we kiss our children goodbye, while we slave for the bosses Our children scream and cry.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Our grocery bills to pay. Not a cent to spend for clothing. Not a cent to...
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs near 100 degrees. Darn it. Plentiful sunshine, of course, with winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight. Lows in the mid to upper 50s. Winds light and variable. Then mainly sunny tomorrow, with highs near 100 again. Winds light and variable. Looks like ragweed pollen is rated high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 17 parts per million. And that daytime UV index is high at level 6, so take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.03 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is... literally, the weather underground. London is 74 degrees and fair. Paris is 76 and fair. Rome is 85 and sunny with a advisory for potential disruption due to thunderstorms. Kabul is 73 and clear. Kyiv is 75 degrees with light rain. Looks like Hong Kong is 80 degrees with rain showers. Tokyo is 81 and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 60 and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 66 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kelvin Chan and Sylvie Corbet of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. French regulators ordered Apple to stop selling the iPhone 12, saying it emits electromagnetic radiation levels that are above European Union standards for exposure. The company disputed the findings and said the device complies with regulations. The French government agency that manages wireless communications frequencies issued the order after the iPhone 12 recently failed one of two types of tests for electromagnetic waves capable of being absorbed by the body. It's unclear why the phone, which was released in late 2020, did not pass the agency's latest round of tests, and why it was only that particular model. France's digital minister said the iPhone 12's radiation levels are still much lower than levels that scientific studies consider could harm users, and the agency itself acknowledges that its tests do not reflect typical phone use. The National Frequency Agency on Tuesday called on Apple to implement all available means to rapidly fix this malfunction for phones already in use and said it would monitor device updates. If they don't work, Apple will have to recall phones that have already been sold, it said. The agency recently tested 141 cell phones and found that when the iPhone 12 is held in hand or carried in a pocket, its level of electromagnetic energy absorption is almost 5 3/4 watts per kilogram, higher than the EU standard of 4 watts per kilogram.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The space launch facility where Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted North Korean leader Kim Jong-un yesterday, Wednesday, reflects an ambitious attempt by Moscow to burnish its scientific glory that faded after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The new Vostochny Cosmodrome has a troubled history, tarnished by construction delays and widespread corruption. After the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union, Russia leased the Baikonur Cosmodrome from Kazakhstan and continued to use it for most of its space launches. The agreement with Kazakhstan allows Russia to keep leasing Baikonur for $115 million a year through 2050. The relatively small plastic launch pad in northwestern Russia has been used for some military satellites and military missile tests. Amid occasional disputes with Kazakhstan over Baikonur's use, Russian authorities declared that the country needed a full-fledged space facility of its own, while emphasizing that it will continue to use Baikonur. In 2007, Putin signed a decree ordering the creation of Vostochny, which means eastern in Russian, on the site of a Soviet-built missile base, but actual construction works only began 5 years later. After the inaugural launch in April of 2016, Vostochny has seen only limited use as Russia's Roscosmos state corporation has continued to rely on Baikonur for the bulk of its space launches. One of the few high-profile missions launched from Vostochny was the Luna 25, an ambitious but failed attempt by Russia to return to the moon after nearly a half a century. The robotic Luna 25 probe crashed into the surface of the moon last month after a glitch that made its thruster fire for longer than planned. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Friday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.